Hey, shalom, guys. I hope you guys are truly blessed. I hope you've been experiencing some of the fruit of all this that we've been looking at and sharing and letting it manifest in your life and hopefully changing your view of the world and I want to say even more than your view of the world, your view of yourself in the world. And it's so crazy who this true Yeshua appears to have been outside of Christianity, and what he was, what he believed, and what those verses in red in the New Testament really meant, not what we were told they meant. And so we've been looking on our Wednesday nights at some past life regressions. Past life regressions, as I've shared, and I will share for maybe those of you who have come along and don't really know what we're doing. Dolores Cannon, you can go look her up. There's videos everywhere about her. She has books, hundreds of books through her publishing company. Dolores was one of the forefronts of quantum hypnotic therapy. Her purpose was to help people with things that are in their life that they can't figure out. And she found out that karma, the long and short of it, that you came into this lifetime in this human body you live in now. You came into this lifetime, and unfortunately you brought baggage from your last lifetime, and possibly even lifetimes further back than that, and possibly even lifetimes of those people who were in your family. And so that's really a mouthful, and it's infinitely larger than maybe what we're willing sometimes to give credit to. You have to, obviously, if you're a believer that it's appointed unto every man once to die and then the judgment, well, you need to learn what that even means, because it's only appointed unto every human body once to die. And the ashes will return to ashes and the dust will return to dust, but the spirit will never die. We are eternal already. And for some of you that may be a breath full, it may go against every piece of doctrine that you've ever heard your whole life, and that's okay. It was against everything I knew too. So, but we've been looking at Dolores's book. This is the first one that we did was the first book. This is the second book she wrote, and it's called They Walked with Jesus. These are out of, Dolores did over 24,000 past life regressions recorded, every one of them recorded, every one of them, transcribed, an enormous wealth of scientific information of past life, and how everyone has a past life. Not everyone will ever learn that. Not everyone will ever access that. Many of you will find out that that's the case and never go spend the money to have a past life regression. And that's a different story than not knowing that we had one. And so the first story was a teacher of Yeshua and John the Baptist, an Essene, which was quite amazing and breathtaking on many metaphysical levels. And now we're looking at a young lady who lived at the time, was at the Temple Mount when Yeshua was there teaching, and who we're finding out now has made a decision to leave her family and to become one of the followers of Yeshua. We've seen some amazing, I don't know, I said this to myself the other day. I said, man, I'm learning to love Yeshua a lot more. He was an amazing guy. He was anything but he hated Christianity. If he came today, he might be the biblical God that destroyed humanity because of Christianity and the lies. They're worse than the Jews are. And so we really get an amazing opportunity by going through this. And any of you who will, I'm sure you have a quantum hypnotic therapist in your town if you live in a town of any size. We don't have one in our town, but we were willing to go 75 miles to find one. And quite shocking. I wish I had the money. I would go spend hours going back. I believe that there is more. I have seen a lot of things about my family. It's helping me understand why these people that I've known my whole life are like they are, and why they tried to program me, and why the deception that they imposed on my programming when I was a small child. All of us have been programmed. It's called your subconscious, and well-meaning people who raised you and told you your whole life that they loved you did that to you. And from their concept of life, they did. But there might be a flaw in their concept of life. So that doesn't mean that you know, your grandmother didn't love you, nor your parents. I'm certainly not saying that. I'm just simply saying that we can only love based on the knowledge we have. And so when you deal with that, then you either come to the decision that ignorance is bliss, or that ignorance is just ignorance. You know, you got your choice. It's a 50-50 hit. So I hope that you come to the concept that ignorance is just ignorance, and it doesn't make people bad because they're ignorant. That can be fixed by giving them the information. They're no longer ignorant. Now we get into the other things that can't be fixed after that. And so you guys know what that is as well. So let's do this. We come to Heart Center together. There's actually a spiritual thing that goes on if you don't know that. If you don't know that, then you maybe quite haven't probably understood that we have spirit, energy, and force inside of us that's constantly working along with our chakras and other things, and they're very powerful and they're very potent and they affect our life. And so we do this, and when people do things with intention and do it in intensity together, then supernatural, wonderful things come out of it. So we bring ourselves to a heart center, set your intentions. My intention is to learn tonight, and then we humbly to each other bow, and we simply say, Namaste. You are blessed. You're not having to wait to be blessed. You are already blessed. If you are waiting for manifestations of one thing or another, then that's a different concept. But the fact that you're blessed is always present. So we left off. Dolores is going to give us some information of her research. For those of you who haven't been with us, certainly we record these every week so that for people who are truth seekers, if you care enough to go back and listen, you will see what's been shared with all of us. And so Dolores writes, the significance of what Naomi wanted to do with her life and the bravery she displayed in leaving her father's house was not made clear until I did research into the customs of the times. During the time of Jesus, the Jews lived strictly by the law. And I'm going to change that for those of you who've been with me for a while. You know why I changed that. Because we use the term very loosely of law, and this isn't the law. I mean, this isn't the American law. What she's talking about is they lived very strictly by adherence to the Torah of Moses. And the Torah of Moses, or the laws of Moses found in the first books of the Old Testament. These rules governed everything in their life and was a point of dispute between the priest and Jesus. And I never really saw this like I see it now as far as understanding. I did ask the question, and I was kind of given the answer that Jesus was a Christian and the Jews hate Christians. I don't know that it was actually said like that, but that was the allusions. Well, you know, we don't keep their Torah, so they hate us. And so these rules governed everything in their life and was a point of dispute between the priest and Jesus. He had been taught to interpret the law differently and more fairly while he studied with the Essenes. He thought that in the priest strictness, they had forgotten the individual and that circumstances may influence how these rules could be applied. The case of how women were treated in that culture is an example. At Qumran, the home of the Essenes, women were treated as equal to the men. They were taught anything that they wanted to learn, and many became teachers. In Jesus and the Essenes, we discovered that Jesus had many women disciples, a point that has disappeared from the Bible during its many revisions and exclusions. Jesus spoke to ordinary people in parables. He presented his teachings and analogies patterned after things in their everyday life, which they could understand and relate to. Jesus' disciples were taught metaphysical laws of the universe. Can I tell you something for those of you that have been with me? All of this, I recognize it even all the way back in a lot of my contemplations. But I recognize that there was something I recognized about myself that made me ask questions even when I was a little child, even though I never got any satisfactory answers. Okay? And many of you have told me in the past, well, I went to my preacher and my preacher said, don't question. Okay? And I have some people here nodding their heads that experienced that. It really puts you in, if you're one of those especially, it really puts you in the place of making it very hard to trust people. It's very hard to believe somebody just on a word. I mean, I would love, as Martin Luther said, that we lived in such a wonderfully high elevated and high vibration society that the only thing that we cared about was the character of the people around us. Okay? Instead, we have songs that make millions of dollars about how we got friends in low places. And I mean, I know I've sang the song probably as much as some of you that listen to country music, and I don't have any problems against Garth Brooks. But if you understood the fundamental damage of that message to the psyche of a human who hears it and has no knowledge, it makes low vibration acceptable. Christianity makes low vibration acceptable. It does nothing to help you increase your vibration. It does nothing to enlighten you of the spirit person that you are. It simply makes you okay to be this low vibration, dense energy person. Because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Well, of course we have. Whoever wrote that had. So there's nobody going to be saved according to the Bible. Because nobody's ever been that. Hello. So, she notices through the first regression, for those of you that have been with me, you went through the whatever, what it was like 30 weeks or something that she went through and took this lady back and learned about the Essenes. And it's quite crazy because many of the things that I've learned about the Essenes, even the people, the scholars who were teaching about the Essenes are ignorant to the fact that these people were metaphysical. And so even their interpretation, though scholarly, though very intelligent, though very well worked out, and though very well researched, they still did not get the minute detail, which is these people were metaphysical. They believed in the spirit world. They believed in eternality. And so they were taught anything that they wanted to learn, and many became teachers. In Yeshua and the Essenes, we discovered that Jesus had many women disciples, a point that has disappeared from the Bible during its many revisions and exclusions. Jesus spoke to ordinary people in parables. He presented his teachings in analogies patterned after things in their everyday life, which they could understand and relate to. Jesus' disciples were taught metaphysical laws of the universe, methods of healing and the performing of so-called miracles, because they had the training to be able to understand these things. It is debatable whether he found anyone he could share all of his knowledge with. The Bible does not give any indication that he ever did. He found that women were more able to grasp his teachings because of their natural intuitive abilities. When the time came for his women disciples to go out and spread the teachings, he knew they would be in more danger than the men, so he paired them with a male companion for their safety. Jesus' respect of women as equals also explains his defense of the prostitute who was in danger of being stoned. All these things caused friction because they were contrary to the teachings of the Torah. This can be understood when we know how women were treated in Palestine during that time. According to the Torah, a woman was inferior to a man. Women took no part in public life. It was suitable and expected for women, especially unmarried girls, to stay indoors. They were not supposed to leave the house without escort, and when they did, they were expected to remain unobserved in public. Marketplaces and council halls and law courts and gatherings and meetings where a large number of people were assembled, in short, all public life, were proper for men but not for women. During the huge popular feast, which took place in the court of women at the temple, the crowds were so large that it became necessary to construct galleries for the women in order to separate them from the men. They could participate in the local synagogue service, but barriers of lattice separated the women's section, and they even had their own special entrance. During the service, women were there simply to listen. A woman had no right to bear witness in legal matters because the law concluded that she would be a liar. Some of these rules were difficult to enforce for economic reasons. Many women had to help their husbands in their professions, such as selling their wares, working the fields. However, a woman could not be alone in the fields, and it was not customary. However, a woman could not be alone in the fields, and it was not customary, even in the country, for a man to converse with a strange woman. This custom was often broken by Jesus to the astonishment of his male disciples. He openly conversed with women wherever he found them. Rules of propriety forbade a man to be alone with a woman, to look at a married woman, or to even to give her a greeting. It was disgraceful for a scholar to speak with a woman in the street. This understanding of customs also shows that women risk condemnation and severe censure for daring to flaunt tradition by even coming to hear him speak. Some of this may explain women's attraction to him. Here was a man who treated them differently from the way in which any man had ever treated them before. No wonder they loved him. Women's education was limited to domestic arts, especially cooking, needlework, weaving, looking after young children. The wife and daughters were totally under the control of the man of the house with no rights at all. The wife's duty was full obedience to her husband, and the children had to put respect for their father before respect for their mother. Up to the age of 12, the father had full power over a girl. She could even be sold into slavery if necessary. At the age of 12, she became a maiden of full age, and the father would arrange a marriage for her. Her ownership and absolute obedience would then be transferred from her to her husband. The custom explains why Naomi was so concerned about her fate if she remained in her father's house. The normal age of a girl's betrothal was between 12 and 12 and a half, where she shut out from society, civilly dead. I'm sorry. Did I jump 2 pages? Yes. I apologize. The marriage usually took place 1 year later. Naomi kept saying she was not yet 13 and that she did not desire to be married and live a normal life. This was the only future that she could know or expect. She knew if she did not express her desires, unheard of for a female, that she would be trapped into a life that she could not tolerate. This explains why her request to leave the home and follow her Uncle Jesus was so extraordinary. It surely would have not been granted under normal circumstances by so openly defying the customs of her people. Naomi showed that she was an unusual young girl. It also explains why she insisted on cutting her hair and dressing. Also explains why she insisted on cutting her hair and dressing as a boy. A young girl was strictly forbidden to be seen in the public alone, let alone being allowed to travel with a group of people. She also disguised herself when she snuck out to attend the hidden meetings. These things would be expected of a boy, but never a girl. Schools, as I explained earlier, were religious schools for the study and understanding of the Torah. Except for reading and writing, nothing else was taught. Education was solely for the Jewish boys and not for girls. Thus, a woman would never be allowed to teach. This ruling may seem contradictory to the lifetime of Abigail in the first part of this book when she was assigned as a teacher at the temple. But Abigail made it clear that she was not a Jewess, so she was not bound by the rules of the Torah. This may also explain the deeper reasons why the priests seemed to despise her and her wisdom, and why they sought to subjugate her. Only against this background can we fully appreciate Jesus' attitude towards women. The gospel speaks of women following him, and this was an unprecedented happening in the history of that time. Jesus knowingly overthrew custom when he allowed this to happen. He preached to women, and he allowed them to participate openly and even ask questions. And John the Baptist baptized them. Jesus was not content with bringing women up into a higher plane that was the custom. He wanted to bring them before God on an equal footing with men. Everything Jesus taught was contradictory and radical from the viewpoint of the average person of the time. It took much bravery for men and women both to come to his meetings and to choose to follow his new type of religion, which, I might add, was actually more ancient than the teachings of Moses. So Judaism was the younger. We look at the thing now, mysticism, which they call New Age, and there is some of it. I have to tell you, it's about as left New Age as it can come. Whatever the radical left is, New Age was birthed with that. It's not necessarily ancient metaphysics or ancient mysticism, which is what Yeshua believed, and that's what he taught, because that's what the truth is. And so our next chapter here for about the next 30 minutes, chapter 7. You remember Yeshua is going on a journey to the colony or city of lepers. And she says, that's okay, I'm not scared, I will come. And so let's see what happens here. Let's see what gets drawn out, and maybe we'll get another picture change about some more things. All I can really say on this level is, women, to all of you women who felt like you were put under bondage, I drastically have to apologize for that, for my part in that, and that's all I can change. Leprosy is a very ancient disease dating from biblical times and probably before. In its worst form, it is truly horrible, and even today, victims are isolated in hospitals, colonies, and islands. Much of this stems from the fear associated with the disease, since it is contagious and the symptoms can create unfortunate physical conditions that persist for several years before eventually killing the patient. It is now called Hansen's disease, and it is still not understood exactly how the germ enters the body or how it is transmitted. It is infectious, but the incubation period is estimated to be from 2 to 20 years. It is very slow acting. Even though leprosy is viewed as contagious, often members of the same family do not contract the disease. So even though leprosy has been around since the beginning of known history, it is still a mystery disease. We should ask ourselves why, if they can come up with a vaccine, why have they not come up with a cure for Hansen's disease? I really have to ask, after 200 years of America, why we haven't fixed a lot more diseases. Why are there more diseases now than there were 100 years ago? And I ain't going to buy the excuse that it's because science knows more now. It is difficult for people of our day to understand the terror and the fear that the disease created amongst the people in Jesus' time. It was so horrible that the only solution was to isolate the victims, separating them in a place apart from the rest of the population. There they could live, but would not have to be observed by others. If people could not see them, they could forget about them. In Jesus' time, suffering was thought to be a sign of God's displeasure. Thus, the people did not care what happened to these poor specimens of human beings, as long as they did not have to associate with them. The Bible calls them unclean, and people lived in fear of contracting the disease. The unhappy victims could not be cured by ordinary means and were shut out from society, civilly dead. Their villages were shunned as much as the individuals. The Bible describes the symptom of the disease and the precautions to be taken, but the descriptions are vague. Today, most biblical scholars agree that leprosy designated any blemish which marked the victim as unclean under Hebraic law. Medical experts claim some of the symptoms not only describe leprosy, but a host of other common skin diseases, which are neither contagious nor life-threatening. Some of these diseases were a variety of cirrhosis, an ancient and very common skin disease. It is the most universal of all skin diseases, being found in every climate and among all races. In some cases amongst the poor and those living in unclean conditions, psoriasis was associated with other infectious disorders, especially scabies or itch. You can rapidly assume a pustular form and give rise to ulceration, thus imitating a symptom of leprosy. There are also several kinds of skin diseases which are produced by vegetable parasites or epithites. The common ringworm is a well-known example of such disease. None of these impair general health. There are also various fungi, such as those which cause common moldiness and dry rot, which are self-propagating and affect houses and garments. This is probably what the Bible defines as leprosy in the house or raiment. These give the appearance of some varieties of psoriasis and are contagious. There could also have been diseases in biblical times which are now unknown to us. Many people with various skin afflictions in the Middle Ages and even later were often erroneously considered to be leprous and treated as such by confinement in leper hospitals. This was done to such an extent that at the beginning of the 16th century an inspection was undertaken of the overcrowded leper hospitals in France and Italy. The greater number of them, and in some instances all of the inmates, were found to be suffering merely from various skin diseases and only a minority from true leprosy. Wow. Thus, it was possible for people with non-contagious and non-life-threatening diseases to be placed in the same category and exiled to isolation with the lepers. The Jews didn't take any chances, and anyone with a persistent skin problem was declared unclean. Fear prevailed, and no one would think of approaching a leper, much less touching one. The lone exception was Yeshua. Because he accepted everyone as equal, he could see beneath the disfigured outer appearance and knew there was an indestructible human soul dwelling within that deformed body. True leprosy is normally a slow and an insidious disease. In the beginning, two distinct features are manifested: loss of sensitivity of the nerve fibers supplying the skin and a congested state of minute vessels under the skin, showing itself in the form of circular spots or blotches of irregular forms and varying extent. On the forehead, the limbs, the body, the face and neck, perhaps showing only a diffused redness. These blotches can change color, and thus there may exist at the same time red, purplish, or white spots. In the early stages, there is scarcely any pain, and a certain degree of numbness or anesthesia exists in all of the affected spots. The fingers especially become numb, wasted, and brown. There are a number of sores like ulcerate and discharge. In other cases, joints are dislocated and fingers and toes fall off. Eventually, limbs are lost and severe disfigurement of the face and body is created. As bone and cartilage are attacked and destroyed, there is massive physical destruction from this disease as it slowly and gradually eats away at every part of the body. In many instances, almost all trace of the human form may be destroyed by mutilation and disfigurement. While the loss of common sensation is pronounced, there are often internal burning and neuralgic pains that produce great suffering. The miserable victims can live 10 or 15 years as the disease progresses, and there is no known cure that is truly effective. Symptoms can be treated, but the disease itself is incurable. Chumagra oil has been the established treatment of leprosy for centuries. In our time, despite new drug developments, Chumagra oil and its derivative ethyl esters continue to be widely used in many parts of the world. This oil comes from seeds of the fruit of a large tree in India. It is quite possible this oil was known and used in Palestine because of active trade with surrounding countries, including India. In the New Testament, 12 cases of leprosy are mentioned, and 10 must be considered under one heading. In Luke 17:12 through 19, Christ healed the 10 lepers, and one returned to give thanks. Nowhere in the New Testament does it mention that Jesus went into the isolated villages especially created for the lepers. There were only these incidences where he encountered them by chance. Maybe this explains why he was not repulsed or frightened by them. He had, according to my own researches with Naomi, spent much time in their midst in their homes. I have gone into so much detail because I believe an understanding of this disfiguring disease will make the conditions Yeshua and his followers worked in more vivid. When Naomi said the first place Jesus' group would go to was the village of the lepers, I begin to see the logic in Jesus' thinking. He had come to the realization that his niece was determined to go with him. He would not be able to talk her out of it, but it would be baptism by fire to take her to a place such as a leper colony. Here she would be exposed to pitiful people with an illness in the worst possible form. It would either make her or break her. She would realize that this type of work was not enjoyable, but it meant being exposed to people suffering in deliberate isolation. This was no accident that Jesus chose to take Naomi into such a situation and expose her to the worst first. He probably reasoned that if she could not take it, she would beg to be returned to the safety of her parents' home. I believe he would have arranged for her to go back to her parents' home, but in such a case, it would be her decision and she would have to live with it. She would have no one to blame but herself. She had followed her heart, and she would soon discover whether or not the path of the Nazarene was her path. When we continued the story at the next week's session, I assumed that nothing interesting could happen on the day and a half journey. For this reason, I moved Naomi ahead to the completion of the trip. And Dolores says, the first journey after leaving your parents' home is almost over. What are you doing and what do you see? Abigail says, we are entering the village of the lepers, and I see a large pond of water and I see hills. The village is protected by the limestone hills. We are entering the village now. Dolores asks, did you have a hard journey? And Anna says, it was long and very warm, but we did not meet with any trouble, so it was not that difficult. Dolores says, do the others in the group know you are really a girl? Abigail says, no, they think I'm a young boy. I am dressed in the robes of a young boy, and even though my face looks a bit feminine, at this age it's very difficult to tell. I am on the thin, wiry side, so it's a good disguise for a boy. Dolores asks, are you going by a different name? Anna says, I haven't. Let me see. She chuckles. I remember now. I hadn't thought about it, but of course, there were so many things on my mind. I was introduced, and the Nazarene hesitated, but then he introduced me as Nathaniel, Nathan. And Dolores says, Nathan, did he tell them you were related in any way? Abigail says, no, he called me the son of a dear friend who was trying to find out if this was the right path to be on. And Dolores says, that was very diplomatic. I wondered what the others in the group knew about you. Then he is going to consider you to be Nathan or Nathaniel at this time. You said this village was protected by the hills. Abigail says, yes, let me see if I can explain this. There's a small set of limestone hills which aren't very high, and at the base of these hills is this village. The pond might be from a large spring. It's on the other side of the village. This is a small colony. There seems to be a little plant life, but the area is fairly dry and desolate. And Dolores asks, is this a long way from other villages or towns? And Abigail says, yes, they chose this location because of its distance. These people are not treated well, and they needed a place where they could live in relative peace. And Dolores says, why aren't they treated well? And Abigail says, this disease creates deformities and much fear in other people. So the average person is not friendly and can barely look at these people, especially when the disease has become critical. They live in fear of getting this disease. And Dolores says, have you ever seen people with this disease? Abigail says, no, I don't really feel fear because I feel I am where I am supposed to be. And my voices and my prayers have given me strength to know that I am to be of service. And knowing that I am helping to heal, whether physically or emotionally, gives me strength. And Dolores says, I suppose it would also give you strength if Jesus doesn't mind going in there. And Abigail says, yes, his lack of fear dissolves any fear I might have. And Dolores says, and you said that there were several others in the group, didn't you? Abigail responds, yes. Let me see if I can count them. There seem to be about 12. And Dolores asks, are they all men? And Abigail responds, there are 2 older women. I think these are women who have backgrounds in healing. They have been on other journeys with him. Maybe they come specifically when he goes to this village. And Dolores asks, do you think he has been to this village before? And Abigail answers, yes, he has. He revisits various locations. They live in hopes of his return. So you see where there was a principle drawn that these sick people, actually it's a beautiful metaphor. These people with disease, these people with sick bodies waited for the return of Jesus. See how simple it was to make that? Do you have any idea how long you will stay there? Abigail says, I seem to think 7 days will pass. And so Dolores says, are you going to live amongst the people while he is there? Or do you know? And Abigail says, we set up our own camp, but it's in the village. And then I am to be by his side, and be taught by the physicians. I will just be an observer or an assistant. And Dolores asked, and some of the group are physicians. Abigail says, yes, I know the ladies have been present for births and helped with that, but they have assisted physicians, so they have that knowledge in their background. And Dolores asks, do you think any of the men are physicians? And Abigail responds, not really trained, not this time. He cannot always get physicians willing to come when he's ready to make the journey. These people have the knowledge of working with these lepers and maybe have been assistants to the physicians so that they can carry on. And Dolores asks, then normally when he makes these journeys, he will take physicians with him? And Abigail says, yes, if they are available and willing. And so Dolores asks the question, yes, I can understand that even a physician would be afraid. Then will you move ahead a little and tell me what happens? And Abigail, with a sigh, yes. Well, there are three of us going into one little house. The family in the house is an older man and a wife, and there seem to be two other people there. The older man, she gave a sharp intake of breath and a sound of revulsion. Oh boy. And Dolores writes, it was obvious Naomi was having her first exposure to someone stricken with the worst stages of the disease. And Abigail then says, I'm trying to be very strong, but softly it's difficult. He's in very critical condition. It seems that all that can be done now is to try and ease his pain, and hopefully he will make the transition out of his body soon. You said there were three of you who went in there. Was Jesus one of them? And Abigail responds, yes, and one of the older ladies. She has a parcel with bandages and different powders she can mix to help soothe some of the soreness. It's soothing, but nothing seems to really conquer the disease. Since I have been here, I've seen it in such different stages, and even every now and then it gives you hope it won't get worse, but these people do the best they can to live with faith and help one another. Dolores says, you said this man is so bad that they would just try to ease his pain. Is the woman going to do that? And Abigail responds, yes, but she is here to mainly bandage and try to soothe the worst of the decay. Jesus is praying and laying his hands upon the man, and it's almost as if I can see a light emanating from this man's face. The Nazarene placed his hands on the top of the head, the crown, the chakra, and I see this glowing light. And then he places his hand over the man's heart, chakra, and he stays this way in silent prayer over the man. And I see this golden glow from his heart area. Emotionally, oh, it's hard to describe. Dolores says, what do you mean? Abigail says it's beautiful. But it's more than that. It fills you up. It fills up any emptiness inside of you. And it makes everything feel warm and loved. And there is no emptiness within. It is hard to put it into words. You mean you feel this way just by watching him? And Abigail says, yes. And you can tell that this man, his face is at ease. The pain seems to be much less. And the Nazarene the other day, he lifted my hand, and with a finger, he drew a circle in my palms. She went through these motions, and he said, this too is the heart, the center of your palms, and the center is another heart chakra. And that's why there is so much power in the healing of these hands, because of that energy coming straight through. So you just got, if you have no knowledge of it, you just got a metaphysical lesson about chakras and why there is energy in the hands. If you will get in the right place in meditation or in calmness and contemplation, you literally can feel the force between your two hands. You see that used, and yes, is it used in a maybe less than benevolent manner of people throwing energy, usually connected with magic? Well, unfortunately, to a large extent, magic has been interpreted to us as something that is bad, and in reality, we are magical. We possess powers that we have no knowledge of. I will say this, and I don't mean in any way to make myself any better. I didn't ask for it when I was invited to go on a situation. But I was invited before I had ever preached a message, before I had ever done anything in a Christian church in Austin, Texas. And I was invited by two people in the church that I attended, which I attended because I was told by my spirit to go there. And I was invited to go pray for this girl's stepdad. And I went. I had no knowledge of what I was supposed to do. I remember it like it was yesterday. I walked up the steps of this little house in Austin, Texas, and I stepped through the door, and I had a experience. What am I supposed to do? And I'll share the picture from there as I saw it. A voice spoke to me and said, love him. No other instructions, only that I was to love him. And I walked in the room and I met a gentleman I've never met before, and he was eat up with tumors. He had tumors the size of oranges and grapefruits all over his body. He had tumors. He had one in his mouth that pushed his tongue over to the side. There were knots all over his body. He was in pain. His desire was to die because it was so bad. And the two people from the church were standing there. And I can't tell you other than what I saw and what I experienced. But I simply put my hand on that man's foot and began to pray inside of myself. And I opened my eyes and there was a light that was emanating from that man. 5 days later, he was dead. You say, well, then what good was that? I see by reading this, it really busts me up inside, because it wasn't about healing him. That body that was there covered with tumors was going to be buried and it would be decayed within a year. It was about the spirit that was inside of that body. And that spirit exposed its light to me. Did I understand the significance for 30 years of that? Absolutely not. Have I ever met anybody who can say honestly, you can either choose to believe me or don't. I don't really care. I know what the truth is. But I'm telling you right now, what you just heard that little girl bring from a past life, I personally have experienced. And she says it's beautiful, but it's more than that. It fills you up. It fills up any emptiness inside of you. It's one of the most amazing times that I've ever encountered. There is no emptiness. It is hard to put it into words, and I certainly concur with that. And so Dolores asked, you mean you feel this way just by watching him? And Abigail says, yes, yes. And you can tell that this man, his face is as ease, and the pain seems to be much less. And the Nazarene, the other day, he lifted my hand, and with a finger he drew a circle in my palms. She went through these motions, and he said, this too is the heart, the center of your palm. And the center is another heart chakra. And that's why there is so much power in the healing of these hands, because of that energy coming straight through. Dolores asked, did he use the word chakra? And Abigail says, heart center, heart chakra. See, if you're totally ignorant to this, you don't have a clue what these words are. The stuff that people have heard me say that they've never heard before is ancient. If you jump past supposed time of Moses, those people all understood chakras and crown chakras. Why did he touch? Why is the laying on the hand? The laying on the hands is a funnel of the crown chakra. Every bit of this is metaphysical. Every bit of it. The only problem is the Christians are trying to do something they don't know anything about, so it doesn't work for them. And so Dolores asked, did he mean your hands or his own? And Abigail says, I think he meant everyone's hands. You see how our minds work? It's only the preacher who can do the thing. Sometimes a preacher is a preacher because the preacher knows who they are. But most of the time, the preacher doesn't even know. That's why they only preach about healing and never do it. And so he took my hand, and he took the other one, and he said, these two are heart centers. And she went through again the motion of drawing circles on the center of her palms. He drew a circle in your palm. Abigail says, yes, maybe this is just part of my teaching because I have always felt the energy and the strength there. And every time he would touch me, it was so strong. So maybe if you know the connection, if you are aware of the connection and it's done through the heart with purity, then the energy is just a direct connection. And that energy from the heart is the strongest medicine. Can I tell you why this may sound like I'm trying to be hard on people, but it's not. I've shared this many times with people. You can scarcely miss it if you have any compassion at all. You can scarcely miss that every time Yeshua does a healing, something moves him. In many cases in the New Testament, you will find that the scripture states he felt compassion and he healed them all. That's a direct quote. And I hate to say this, but we live in a society where most people have no compassion for anybody but themselves. That's why you see no supernatural things done. You cannot enter our higher self without love and kindness and compassion for other human beings. You cannot enter the power of the kingdom except that you first come to the place of loving yourself and then duplicating that with every human you encounter. And that's not happening, and you will never see the power without it, ever. I'm sorrowful, but that is the truth. That's why you don't see supernatural things. It's because of your heart. Not somebody else's. So, can we fix this? The answer is absolutely yes. The power doesn't diminish just because you, in your human mind, have no ability or have no desire or have no drive to find compassion for other people in worse situations than yourself or better situations than yourself. Because he also healed the rich man's child. So it's not only you have to go help people who are in need. It is okay for us to help people who have no needs, except help. There's more to why he said everything revolves around that one statement. Most people will convince themselves that they're loving. They will justify their behavior towards other people as love because they need to justify it. But what most people will not ever stop and do and ask themselves a question, is the action or is the thought that I'm about to have, is that really loving myself? If you steal, you curse yourself. You can't love yourself and be a thief. It's impossible. You are a thief or you love yourself. If you love yourself, you will never steal from somebody else because you know the spiritual significance of taking something from someone else curses you. I'm sorry, I'm preachy tonight. It's just so powerful. You cannot deceive the Spirit. The Spirit knows you. But we continue to try instead of be honest. Because it's only when we will become honest with ourselves. Why does the brother of Yeshua that the world was made for, Yaakov or James, why does Yeshua say that the world was created for James? Because James took this message and lost his life on the Temple Mount and had his head bashed after they pushed him off of the temple for the sake of this same ministry that Yeshua also suffered for. If it had not been for Yaakov, you would have never heard a story of Yeshua. He is the one who continued the lineage of Yeshua. And so, many people won't understand that. Would they? That the heart is the strongest medicine. Why have I been in churches and had 1,000 people lay hands on me and felt nothing? Because they have no heart. Their chakras are plugged. They have no energy. Oh, don't doubt for a minute that they're looking for some kind of power. We know Simon followed Paul around looking for some kind of power. The sorcerer. And so, Abigail says that's how he explained it. That's what I understood, and I never heard anyone say anything like that before, and most of you have never heard any of these words said to you before. You want to know how to become powerful in the kingdom? You become powerful by the state condition of your heart, and there is no faking it. You can tell people how much you love them. You can pat them on the back. You can do all the things, and your heart be bad, and you will never experience the supernatural power of the universe. Not that you couldn't, just that you won't. So, she says, I guess not, but it just seems so natural to me. Then he means that in addition to the heart inside of your body, now we know this is coming out in the New Age. People like Greg Braden, great noted people who are making millions of dollars on television, are saying these same words, folks. It's not new knowledge. It's only new to us. That addition to the heart inside of your body, there are also other heart centers in the body. You have a heart chakra here, but you also have a heart chakra that's here. Most people don't know that either. So when he told me, it just seemed so right. It made so much sense. And then when I watched him, it was all so clear. And when you look at the people, you know that it is a tool. This poor man was in such desperate pain, and his face is so at peace right now. And that's exactly what I experienced. I didn't see the tumors disappear. I didn't watch the cancers fall out of his body. But I saw, even if it was for a temporary time period, did the universe know that that spirit was going to be exiting that body 5 days later? Absolutely yes. And I believe with all of me that he knew he was about to exit. And so, Dolores asked the question, do you think the others in the room can feel the same thing you feel? And if you haven't experienced it, then it would be hard for you to understand what it feels like to stand in the presence of supernatural purity, because that's what it is. Until there is supernatural purity inside of a person, you will never know the peace that passes all understanding. But when you're there, it's the weirdest thing you can ever imagine. To feel totally perfect. Everything is perfect. And yet you recognize fully that nothing is perfect. And so Abigail answers, I don't know. I know they must feel something because the silence is so different. They must feel the energy or just see the love and the caring flowing from him. Have any of you ever prayed for somebody and you felt virtue leave your body? What is the virtue? It's talked about, and everybody gets hung up on the lady with the issue of blood touching the hem of his garment And if you're a Jew, then you would say, well, he becomes unclean and he's no longer sacred. That's where their minds are at. But most people really miss the whole point and the whole purpose, which is the leaving of the goodness from him. The leaving of the goodness from him is his energy. When that lady with that issue of blood touched the hem of his skirt, because his clothes touched his body exuded, released supernatural energy, and that woman's situation was changed. It's just a flow of energy, friends. And a corrupt heart stops that flow. And so she says, I don't know if they can feel it, but I can't imagine that they don't, basically. I think it would be obvious to any man who watched him that this is not an ordinary man. Abigail says, no, he is so aware. He is so conscious. Man, she's just splashing what I've been sharing with you guys for months now. She's just splashing this all over who he was. He is so aware, so in tune with she had difficulty finding the words, God's connection. Or God within him, or God purpose. And quite honestly, there's pieces of all of the above. I don't know the right word, but I guess most people wouldn't even be aware of things that are so clear and so simple to him. And that's certainly true. Do you think he is different from other men? Abigail says he is different because of his sensitivity and understanding and his total lack of fear. He is so sure of his place and duty. And so Dolores asks again, have you ever heard anyone say that he might be different from other men? And Abigail says yes. There are people that turn him into something that is more like a god. Oh, so you see, it was going on back then. It's not surprising that Christianity would get it wrong. It's not surprising that Christianity would think that you need him for salvation, and by so doing, they never find him inside themselves. That's been the whole sucker bet all along. All we have to do is keep you from understanding who you are, and you will never experience what you truly are. He exposed who he was so that others could see what they were. And he says, yes, she says, yes, there are people that turn him into something that is more like a god. He has powers and capabilities such as I have never seen. I know he is of flesh, but yet I know his spirit and energy is different. You've heard people say that they think he's more like a god, Dolores asked. Abigail says yes, because when you see him do some of the things he does, there's no way to explain it. And yet he tries hard to teach that we are all capable of being what he is and doing what he is doing. Except that I believe most of us can't find, oh my God, it's right here, the purity of heart and the desire. It's very hard to be on a path like his and not be drawn off by other things that most women, men and women, are drawn off by. Dolores says, yes, the human part of living would make it very difficult to remain pure. So it's all of those programmings and it's all of those conscious opinions that you have about what the world is and how it seems that defiles your spirit. The human part of living would make it very difficult to remain pure. In that way, he is different. Abigail says, in that way, he is like no one else. And Dolores says, I wonder what he thinks if he hears people say he is like a god. Abigail laughs, but he doesn't accept that. Oh, I can remember him saying, it's something like this. He said, My brother, I am no more than you. I only recognize what I can be and how I can serve. And I have true love and faith in my God. He tries to clarify what he thinks his purpose is. And Dolores says, what does he think his purpose is? And Abigail says, he thinks he was sent here to be a teacher of life, a ray of light, to be an example of what humankind can be and of the gifts humankind has. And that people can do all what he is trying to teach them. Dolores says, that makes sense to me. But you know how people are. It's very hard to get through to some of them. And I will say, for some, it is near impossible. Not that it's not possible, it's that they will allow it to be possible. Abigail answers and says, yes. And most people live in such fear of something or many things until they can dispel this fear and not be afraid of knowing themselves and listening to their heart. Then they will not be reached. They have to find it in themselves. Wow. So Dolores says, yes, that makes sense. I returned to the scene she was watching, but he's working with this man in the room, and then the man is no longer in pain. Does he do anything else in that little house? And Abigail says, no, he was with the man a while, and then when he went over to the wife and just held her hands, I couldn't quite hear what he said to her, but he said he would return, and he was going to the next visit. And Dolores says, do you go with him on that visit too? And I think we're going to pause right there. Wow. Well, I certainly have no desire to brag, but I will say that I think if your heart is listening, and if you are listening from your heart, then the message that I keep sharing with you, it's pretty obvious what that message is. Does it always seem kind for us to have to hear that we have to look at ourselves and that we're the hindrance? I'm quite aware, my friend, of my human mortality. But I'm also aware of the things that have supernaturally happened for me. Did I do them? No. Was I any different person? Not that I knew. So for each and every one of you, no matter whether you feel it, no matter whether you understand it, there is only one thing on this earth that keeps us from walking in our full potential. And that's the person we look at in the mirror. There is nothing else. If you think that full potential is how much money you can make, you're a fool. If you think that your full potential is how much of a smart aleck or how much you can make people think you're something, you're a fool. It's only when you begin to understand and then desire in you to know your true God self that you will ever even have begun your journey. Many people have not begun their journey. Many of you are looking for a replacement for Christianity, and it doesn't exist. Not in the spirit world. The spirit world is already in you, but it's locked up. And it's up to you to find the key and unlock it. Shalom and peace to each and every one of you. I hope that you have been blessed. What an amazing, amazing day. It'll take me the rest of the week, and I still won't have gotten a hold of everything that I read tonight. I'm so thankful to my source, my universe. I said when I began to recognize that the universe, I began to look at everything differently. And it's so funny to me that the universe constantly proves to me that it loves me, because it constantly brings me truth. I don't care about the rest of things. It doesn't mean I don't have needs. It doesn't mean any of those things. But the greatest need I have is to find my higher self and then use that for good of other people. And if that's not your purpose, then you're looking in vain. You'll never find it. But on the other side, if that is your purpose, then you are one of the ones that the Spirit said on Saturday to focus my mind on those people who are listening. And so peace to you. I hope those out there that are, I hope you feel the energy, because it is real. It is functioning constantly. If your radio isn't tuned, then you may need to change your tuning. And unfortunately, it's not appropriate for a man to change another man's tuning. It's totally your responsibility. So peace and love, shalom to each and every one of you. I hope you'll take some of these words to heed. They're really huge. There's a lot more truth that was just exposed to you than just those mere words. So, in the spirit of peace and love, namaste.